Today, we're going to do a compression check on this Mazda 6. A compression test is something that you would want to do on an engine that's not performing properly. What we're going to actually check is to see how much compression we really have on each cylinder. And there's several steps to do this correctly. And it's important that you follow all of the steps in the proper order and all the test conditions are right so you get a good test with good results. The most important thing that we start with is a fully charged battery. And you're going to see shortly why that fully charged battery is important. And you can see right here we've got our battery charger that you learned to use on a previous episode. Charging up our battery so we know it's in top condition to perform this test properly. The next thing that you want to do is we want to disable the fuel system. In this particular instance, we are going to remove the fuel pump fuse. Our next step will be to remove the fuse panel cover. We'll take a look at it here and see where our fuel pump fuse is. We'll remove the fuel pump fuse. Now the vehicle is disabled and the fuel system will not function. Be sure to put the fuse aside so you don't lose it. This particular engine is like a lot of modern cars. It has coil on plug. That means that it has an ignition coil for each cylinder. This is very typical of a modern car. If we were working on something older, we would remove the spark plug wires, labeling them so we know we got them in the proper order. Then we're going to go ahead and use our ratchet or a wrench, either would be good, and we're going to remove our ignition coil. Sometimes there's a plastic cover over these things. Usually you can get them out with your hand after a few turns of the system. And go ahead and remove the ignition coil and lay it aside. On this particular vehicle, there's no reason to remove the wiring. You do want to make sure that everything goes back in the same spot that you took it out from. So the same procedure is done with all 4 coils and plugs. Before I remove the spark plugs, it's a good idea to clear away any debris on the engine, as that way it doesn't drop down in the spark plug hole. I'm going to use our shop vac. There we go. All the large chunks have been taken care of. That way I don't have to worry about anything going down in the spark plug hole when I take the plugs out. Our next order of business is to remove the spark plugs. On this particular car, we use a 5/8 spark plug socket with a rubber boot inside that grabs onto the spark plug. And we remove all the spark plugs from the engine. On a hot engine, particularly a hot engine with aluminum head, the spark plug may be very difficult to remove. And we want to be careful as not to strip the head. Now, ordinarily, I'd recommend taking the spark plug out only when the engine's cold. But to do a compression test, if possible, you want to do it when the engine's warm. Now, these particular spark plugs have a very long threaded area. So it takes quite a few turns to get them out. And as you can see with the rubber end on it, the spark plug pulls right out, and I don't have to go down in there fishing for it. And we're going to remove all 4 spark plugs the same way. After I remove the spark plugs, I want to lay them out in order that they came out of the engine. That way I can put them back in where they came out, but also, more importantly, I can look for any irregularities that may give me some indication on why this engine isn't running well. What you see here is a compression test kit. It has a gauge that actually measures our compression, and it has lots of hoses that would fit different size spark plug holes. Well, what we want to do is take one of our spark plugs and we want to match up the best hose for the best spark plug. So if I've got a short spark plug, I don't want to be sticking a long nose into that thing. That'd be a good way to break the crack a piston or something. So we want to choose the one that best fits our needs. And in this case, it looks like this one is going to do the trick. What we need to do is put this end down into the spark plug hole. And we don't have to crank it crazy, we just need to make it snug. Hand tight is all you need. So we put that in there, we grab our gauge, and we put it on the end. This is just like our air hose. Quick disconnect fitting. Make sure it's on there secure. Set it somewhere we can read it. And now we're going to move on and check the vehicle. Now I'm inside the vehicle and I'm going to crank it over. If I had a remote starter, I would actually crank it over from under the hood, but in this case, in this vehicle, it is much easier to use the key. So, this is where it comes into play where I have that good battery. Make sure the car's in park or neutral. Parking brake is applied. I want to make sure that the accelerator is pushed down all the way. I want that throttle open so I have air to compress. Now, this being a manual transmission car, I'm going to push the clutch in and I'm going to let the engine crank over about 5 cycles. After I do my first test on my first cylinder, I want to mark the results down. Then I want to go over to my second cylinder and I'm going to do them in order, and I'm going to do all 4 cylinders. If I had a 6 cylinder, I'd do 6. If I did an 8, I'd do 8, and so forth. So we're going to test it again. Let's see. Before I remove the compression tester from the spark plug hole, I want to press this small button right here to release the pressure. In this gauge, you kind of have to tap it a little bit too to get it back down to 0. She's got a few miles on her, I'll tell you that. As you can see, I've recorded our various pressures that I found on the cylinders in pounds per square inch on this piece of paper. 194, 195, 160, and 80. 80 is 40% of 194. Well, it's about 41% actually, but that's close enough. The symptom on this vehicle has a dead miss on one of the cylinders, so the engine vibrates and doesn't run smoothly. And as you can see, we have a problem on this cylinder here. Now I'm going to want to put the spark plugs back in the hole. What I don't want to do is drop them right down in there. That's a good way to bend up the electrode. Doesn't do a good job. I want to place the spark plug inside the socket, place it down in the hole, and hand tighten it. Once I've got it hand tight, I can go ahead with my ratchet and go the rest of the way. Now, ordinarily, I would want to go a little further to figure out why this car has low compression. And we're going to do that another day. But today, I just wanted to show you the compression test. So we put the spark plug in, make sure it's snug, remove our socket, move on to the next spark plug. After the spark plugs are back in the engine, we want to put our ignition coils back on. I'll make sure it gets in there snug, and don't forget to put in the bolt that holds it in and snug it up. You'll want to do this procedure on all 4 spark plugs. Don't forget to replace your fuel pump fuse or relay. Our vehicle is back together, and now we know it has low compression in one of the cylinders. Where could that compression being lost at? Could be being lost through an intake valve, an exhaust valve, through a head gasket, through the block, because of down in through the piston rings, any number of places. But that was our first test to see if we had low compression. Now that we know, in a future edition, we're going to actually go out and determine through a pressure check where that compression is leaking. Have a good afternoon and good luck working on your projects at home.